So to start with this fun glitter peekaboo, we are going to cover our entire cup in glitter. So there's one of two ways that you can do this. You can use the epoxy method and base coat your cup first, then apply a thin layer of epoxy. However, I am just applying my paint directly to my cup, and then I'm going to just dump my glitter onto the wet paint and do it that way. If you're following along with this method here, you do want to make sure that you work quick because the paint will dry and your glitter will not adhere properly. So I am just doing a pretty thick layer of paint and I'm working quick before that dries, and then I'm just going to dump my glitter directly onto the wet paint. You do want to make sure that you pick a paint color as close to your glitter as you can. This will help really make that glitter pop. Once you've got your cup fully covered, you do want to make sure to give that a couple of taps just to get any of that excess glitter off. We don't want that hanging around when we go to epoxy. So just make sure that it's fully covered, give it a few taps, and then we're going to let that dry for about an hour. Once your paint is dry, you're just going to add your first layer of epoxy. Just make sure that you have a nice smooth coat of epoxy before we move on to our next step. Once your epoxy is cured, we are going to add our decal and our transfers. So this decal here you'll see is white backed, so even though it is a darker color glitter, my decal will still show through no matter what color glitter I put it on. So I really love this type of decal and it looks completely flawless. You don't even notice any of the excess clear parts on the cup when it's covered in epoxy. So I am just lining it up, making sure that it's on there nice and smooth, and I'm just rubbing out any of those air bubbles, making sure that it is completely flat on my cup. So with my transfers, I'm just cutting them out individually and I'm cutting off any of the excess that I don't want. Now with these transfers, they are a little less forgiving than the decal. So you do want to make sure that you line these up perfectly and pre-position them to where you're going to want them on your cup first, because once you place them down, you will not be able to remove them easily from the cup. So to apply the transfers, you're just going to peel the paper backing off, careful where you touch not to touch any of the actual transfer itself, and then you can use a squeegee or just a wooden popsicle stick and just make sure that you firmly press the transfer down. Otherwise, if you don't fully adhere it to the cup, when you go to lift the backing off, it will peel some of that off. So if that happens, just go back over it again with your squeegee or your popsicle stick and just try and firmly rub that back down in place. Because these transfers are more delicate than the decals, they are a little trickier to apply, especially on like a curved surface. You can't easily pop the bubbles or get rid of the wrinkles with the transfers. So I'm just very carefully applying part of the transfer first on the curved part, and then I'm going back in and just kind of pressing and rubbing the rest of it down so that it fully sticks. Now, if you do get a wrinkle, it's not as noticeable. You can kind of smooth that out with your finger as you go. Once you've got all of your decals and your transfers lined up to where you'd like, just make sure you smooth them down, that you don't have any air bubbles sticking up, and then we're going to add our layer of epoxy here. So just mix up equal parts A and B, whichever epoxy you like. I am using Fast Set here because I want this to cure quickly and it still gives me the same flawless finish. So I'm just fully going over my entire cup, and then I'm going to let that cure for about 4 hours. don't forget to use your torch to pop any of those micro bubbles. So once your epoxy is fully cured here, we're going to cover it all up with the Peekaboo method. So for my main decal, I did want a lot of that showing. So what I'm doing here is I'm just using pieces of masking tape and I'm putting them at various lengths. So that way when we go to spray paint in the next step here, my main decal will still be fully visible when I peel that tape back. Now you can do this any method you like. This is just my personal preference. So it's entirely up to you how much of your decal you want showing. Now we're ready for our spray paint. So you'll first want to go in with black, just lightly, just enough to kind of cover it. You don't need full coverage, and then you're going to go right over it while it's still wet with the cream color, or you can use white, whichever colors you choose. So this next step here is just my personal method on doing the Peekaboo. So I actually am going in while my spray paint is still wet and I'm kind of blending the two colors together, and I'm also getting rid of some of that spray paint so I can see where my transfers are. So this is just easier for me and less rubbing with the alcohol in the next step. So I like doing it this way. I find that it's a little bit easier, and I like the colors when they blend together like this. So you can either wait until your spray paint is dry and you can go in with your alcohol as I do in the next step, which is just going to require a little bit more rubbing and you won't have as much of the blend here as I do, but this was just easiest for me. So once you've done your blending and you've wiped off as much as you want, we're going to just let it dry for about 5-10 minutes, and then we're going to make sure we peel the tape back carefully, and you can remove any of the excess paint that you don't want on the decal here. I am using coffee filters with just 98% alcohol, just because the coffee filters they minimize the lint. You can also use anything you have on hand, like a paper towel or a baby wipe or a Q-tip. So once I've got my main decal uncovered here, I'm just going to clean that up, and then I'm going to start by going in where my transfers are, and I'm going to clean some of that up. Now just know this process here does take quite a bit of work. You are going to be scrubbing for a bit. So I like to use my alcohol, and I just kind of go in lightly and I will clean it up as needed. Now some people do use acetone, which does work quicker. However, you do tend to take more of the paint off, so just be mindful if you decide to use that instead. So I'm not going to fully uncover all of the transfers. I do want parts of them peeking out, but I still want part of it hidden, just to kind of go with the style of the cup that I'm going with here. So I'm just going in, clearing out some of that, so there's still some spaces of glitter that can be seen too, because we obviously don't want to cover all of the beautiful glitter up. So the trick with Peekaboos is you don't want to remove too much, because otherwise you will kind of have just a smudgy, dirty looking cup. So with the Peekaboo here, I'm just removing as much as I feel necessary, and then I'm just going to very lightly go over the entire cup with just the alcohol and the coffee filter, and I'm kind of just going to blend the colors together lightly, just so it doesn't look as streaky. Once I've got it all cleaned up and it looks how I like, I am just going to let that dry for about 24 hours and then we are going to add our epoxy. So again, I'm just mixing up 10 milliliters each part A and B of my epoxy here, and I am going to apply it over the entire cup, making sure I don't miss any areas, including the bottom. We want a nice smooth layer here, and then I will be using my torch to pop any of those micro bubbles. Once it's fully covered, I'm just going to let that cure, and that's it. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed and learned something from this video, and if you're looking for more fun and crafty tutorial videos, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button.